In this video, you're going to learn how to make a polished, game-worthy sprint system. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is set up our character's attributes. So we're going to go into replicated storage, create a configuration instance, which is pretty much just a glorified folder with a special icon. And then we'll create a module script, call this character config. And all this is going to be a table containing our character's attributes. So we'll go ahead and set those up real quick. Alright, so all these stats are pretty self-explanatory. So we have our base walk speed, so when we're done sprinting, we can reset it back to that. Our sprint speed, our stamina, which is what's going to be subtracted, and then our max stamina, so we know what to recharge our stamina back to. Alright, to actually use these attributes, we're going to create a script in server script service. We'll call this player data. And now we're just going to dump all of these attributes into our humanoid, so that way we can use them later in the scripting. Alright, so let's get access to these attributes. So first we're going to need replicated storage. And then we'll actually get the configuration folder. Alright, and just make sure that you're using the require function on this, so that way we can actually get the values inside of the script. Alright, so now what this does is it waits for our character to be loaded, and then it iterates through each stat and its value. So this right here would be the stat, here's the value, and then it's setting that as an attribute onto the humanoid. So it would be setting the stat and then the value. So if we go and play this, we'll see what that looks like. So go into workspace, find your character, go to the humanoid, scroll all the way down, and now you have all of these stats that you can use anywhere in your scripts. Alright, so now we can go and start working on the actual sprint system. So we'll go into starter player, go into starter character scripts, and then create a new local script. We'll just call this sprint client. And we'll go ahead and start setting up the input. Alright, so for this video we're going to be using context action service to set up the input. Alright, so what we're doing right here is we're binding a new action to the context action service called sprint. It's going to be bound to a function called sprint, which we'll create up here. This true is whether or not we want to create a touch button for mobile, which we do, and then we're binding it to the left shift. Alright, so up here we've created our sprint function, so it passes in the three parameters: action name, input state, and input type. So using the input state, we're first going to check if it's beginning, and then we're also going to check if it's ending, right? Because if it's a sprint system, so we need to check if we're holding the shift. Alright, so what we're going to do next is change the character's speed based off of the attributes we've set in replicated storage. So we got to get the character and the humanoid. Okay, so now what we've done here is when the input is beginning, we're setting our humanoid's walk speed to humanoid get attributes sprint speed. And then after we let go of the left shift, we're resetting our walk speed back to the base walk speed. And we're doing that using the attributes we set earlier. So we'll go ahead and play and test this. We hold down shift, you can see we go a little bit faster. Let go, we go back to our regular walking speed. In order to set up the stamina, we'll need access to the run service. So what this render stepped event does is it runs every frame prior to the one that you're seeing, which makes it perfect to constantly change our player's stamina. Okay, so to make this work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these two lines of code right here, and we're instead going to change this to use Boolean values. So now what we've done is when the input begins, we set this boolean to true, and when it ends, we set it to false. So now we're checking those booleans here to set the speed, and that'll make sense why we're doing that after we get to this step. So now what we've done is every frame of the game, we get access to the humanoid stamina attribute, and then we're checking if we are sprinting. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that stamina attribute to stamina minus stamina usage. So every frame that we're sprinting, we're just subtracting 0.5 from stamina, and then we're printing that right here. So now we can go ahead and test the game. So you can watch it get printed right now, and if we hold shift, you can see it draining. So the next thing we want to do is set up recharge functionality. So what we're going to do is check the last time that the player was sprinted. Alright, so we're just going to create this variable called last sprint, which we'll set to math.huge for now, and that'll make sense why we do that in a second. And then every time this conditional is run, we're going to set last sprint to tick, which is just the current time. Alright, so now what we've done here is we've checked after we're done sprinting. We're going to say if tick, which is the current time that it's reading this line of code, minus last sprint, which is the time that we were last holding down the shift key, is greater than or equal to recharge time, which we've set up here, and that's a second. Then we're going to start recharging our stamina, so it's just adding 0.5 to our stamina every frame of the game. And we also have this conditional right here to make sure that our stamina is less than max stamina, so that way we don't go above 100. So now we can go ahead and test this, and it should work. Alright, so I'll hold shift, I'll stop sprinting, you can watch it recharge, and it goes right up to 100 and then stops. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is stop our character from sprinting whenever we don't have enough stamina. So what I've done here is I've checked if stamina is less than stamina usage, and I checked it against stamina usage instead of 0, because if we just did 0, then our stamina would go into negative numbers, which isn't what we want. So after that happens, we're going to set is sprinting to false, and then reset our walk speed back to base walk speed. And then we also put in here if is sprinting and stamina is greater than 0, that way we don't continue sprinting after our stamina goes down. So we'll go ahead and test this, and we'll just sprint. And as you can see, after it goes down to 0, it stops us, and then we can start again. Although one issue I noticed is that if we hold shift while we're standing still, our stamina is going to drain. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. Alright, so I just added this extra conditional that says humanoid.moveDirection.magnitude is greater than 0. So this move direction is a vector of where we're moving, and then the magnitude is just a single number. So if it's greater than 0, then that means we're moving. So now if we hold shift, we stop moving, I'm still holding shift, and as you can see, my stamina is not going down. Alright, so now for the fun part, we can actually create our stamina GUI. So we're going to go into starter GUI, create a new screen GUI, and we're just going to name this stamina screen. Alright, now we're going to add a frame into this. We're going to call this stamina bar. And make sure for this to work correctly that when you're scaling it, you use the scale. So that's just going to be this first number here. So as a placeholder, let's do 0.20, 0.30. And now we can scale it how we want it. So I want mine to look like this. Then we're going to add another frame inside of it. This will be how much is remaining. And then we're going to make sure it fits the whole thing. Alright, so now we can go ahead and color everything. So I want to make this remaining bar a little bit smaller real quick, just so we can see what's going on behind it. Alright, so I'm going to make the background transparency 0.75. I'm going to change the background color to black. Then we're going to change the color of the remaining bar to a nice green color. That looks good. Now, if you notice, one problem is that whenever we scaled it down to 0.75, it's going up instead of down. So the way we're going to fix that is by rotating this bar, the main one, to 180 degrees. So now you can see that if we were to scale it down some more, the bar is actually going down. Alright. So now let's just reset this to 1 and reposition it where we want it. Alright, so once we have that set up, we can go and create our local script. And we'll just call this stamina bar client. Alright, so first off, let's get access to our characters so we can get our attributes. Now let's get access to all of the UI elements. There's two nice things about working with attributes. One is that we can access them from any script, and two is that we can detect every time the attribute is changed. So we'll go ahead and do that with the attribute change signal. Alright, so now every time we detect that our attribute gets changed, we need to rescale this remaining bar, so we'll do that using this. Alright, so what I've done here is every time our stamina gets changed, we're going to store that in a variable called stamina, and I also put up here max stamina is the humanoid's max stamina attribute. And then to scale it, so all we need to do is change the Y. So 1 is the max scaling of our on the Y-axis, and then stamina divided by max stamina is going to get the percent of stamina that we have left. So we subtract that from 1, and then subtract it from 1 again, and that gives us the proper scaling. So if we go ahead and play this, it should work correctly. So we'll sprint, we can see it goes down, we'll sprint all the way until it's out. We stop sprinting and it recharges. And we can sprint again whenever it's coming back. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is add animation. So I'm not much of an animator myself, so I'm just going to use this animation that I got off of the marketplace. So what we'll do is we'll go into sprint client, and then we're going to set this animation up. Alright, make sure that once you create your animation instance, which we're putting under the sprint client, you go to your animation, copy the asset ID, and then paste it into here. Alright, so what we've done here is we've got access to the animation object, so sprint is equal to script.sprint, and then we're loading that into our humanoid's animator so it can actually be played. So we do sprint anim is equal to humanoid.animator load animation sprint. Alright, so now all we've done here is when we start sprinting, play the animation. When you stop the animation. And then right down here, whenever we run out of stamina, we're also stopping the animation. So let's go ahead and play and test this. Alright, so I'll start sprinting. You can see the animation plays, we stop, stops, and then we'll go ahead and just run out our stamina, and you can see it stops for us. So there's an issue you might run into with this sprint system. So in my player data, I've set up this simple loop where it freezes the characters in the games, then after 3 seconds it unfreezes them. So we'll go ahead and test this, and we'll see an issue when we get frozen. So we're frozen, wait for it to freeze us again. And then if I hold shift, it resets our walk speed, so we get unfrozen immediately. So in order to fix this, what we're going to do is add a few conditionals into our sprint client. Okay, so all I've done here is right above where we make our player sprint, we're saying if humanoid.walk speed is less than or equal to 0, then return in. So we're just not going to execute any of this code. And also, when we're in the process of sprinting and draining our stamina, we're going to make sure that our stamina, or that our walk speed is greater than 0, so that way we don't drain our stamina while we're not moving. So we'll go ahead and play and test this. So we're frozen right now. I'm pressing shift, now we're unfrozen, and wait for it to freeze us, and now I'm pressing it again, and it doesn't work. I know it's been a while since I posted, but I have a huge announcement. My Studios game is in its final stages, so if you like the sprint system, then go check it out by the link in the description. If you join our group and Discord, you'll get unique rewards for being some of the first testers. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can get this channel to 1K subscribers.